All right, welcome to the very first episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG podcast, and today we will be discussing Final Fantasy 15. Specifically, we're going to focus on the story itself, and there will be spoilers for this game. So if you have not watched, or I should say played this game, then I would go play that game and then come back and watch this video. Now, if you'd prefer to listen to it in iTunes or a different podcatcher, you can find this episode there. Just type in Phoenix Edge and it should come right up. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, of course, you can find this on YouTube. Just type in Phoenix Edge and it'll pop right up. But other than that, I just want to give some other spoiler warnings out there. So we have Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy VII. We did reference those as kind of a focal point of what the series was doing before and what it's doing now. So if you haven't played those games, I would keep that in mind, as those games will probably be spoiled for you if you keep watching this video. Normally we will be recording the video of us both talking about this and having footage from the game and everything, but I did have some technology issues that kind of stopped that from happening. So next week we will be to video, but this week is going to be audio only, but there will be game footage and different things to illustrate what we're talking about, so it won't be a static image. Other than that, I do want to give out a shout out to Mike from Dark Pixel Gaming. He was kind enough to answer quite a few of my questions with Adobe Premiere, so that was very useful, so I really appreciate that. But other than that, I think that's about it. So I hope you enjoy this episode and check us out next week for another episode with Final Fantasy 15 regarding the gameplay. All right, welcome to the very first episode of our unnamed show. We're still working out the actual title. Basically, what we're trying to do here is just discuss different games, talk about them, what we liked, what we didn't like. And I have my good buddy here. His name's Eric. What's up, Eric?
Hey.
And then my name's Hat, and today we're going to be discussing Final Fantasy 15. Eric is actually a huge fan of the game, so I thought it would be interesting if I brought him on here to talk about what he loved with the game.
Oh, absolutely.
I know he's got a lot of things he wants to get off his chest.
Because of what this one has done.
Yeah. I don't think I have as strong feelings as Eric does, but I wasn't a big fan of the game after I beat it. I know Eric is, he hates it, I think, right?
Hate's a very strong word. So that's probably why I'm going to use it today.
Yeah. Well, first off, before we start, because we're just going to discuss the story today, how do you feel when people say a lot of it had to do with the expectations? They say, hey, people waited for 10 years. They had all these expectations, and it's unfair to expect, this masterpiece after 10 years, and that a lot of what you're feeling right now is not warranted because of those expectations. Do you think that's a valid criticism, or?
Not really. I find the 10-year thing, high expectation thing, I don't expect masterpieces from people at all with these type of games. I at least expect a completed game. Something that's worth my $60. And it's simple as that. And not even 10 year, because I know what happened to the game.
Right.
The actual development of it was about, 4 or 5 years maybe?
Mm-hmm.
On it. And I felt like this is your bread and butter franchise. This is something that was clearly not ready to come out yet. And I definitely would have been willing to wait more. But in the question of the expectations for it, I think was too high. It's not really. I don't think the amount of time was more of an issue for me.
Right.
Just because I've been following it the whole time. And anyone's been following it know it hasn't actually been 10 years with it. And so I kind of treat it like it was a game made in 4 or 5 years.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I remember when I first saw that trailer, right when they first released it, and I was like, oh, dude, that looks way better than the main Final Fantasy 13, because it was originally Versus 13. And I was just like, oh, wow, this looks awesome. And then, I got busy with other things. I stopped following it for a while. And I came back to it later, and I was surprised, wow, they're still holding on to this thing. I just figured they canceled it, So, I don't know. the whole expectation thing, I don't know if it really resonates with me either, because it just feels like it's kind of like a lousy excuse. Because when you put that tent on it, it seems like the game can't ever be bad because there's this expectation thing looming over it, which I don't think is fair. Because, I mean, I think there's a lot of games that I've looked forward to that weren't quite as good as I expected, but I think I was still objective enough to realize it was still pretty good. But
yeah, and like I don't ever go into any game thinking that it's going to be a masterpiece right off the bat. Like playing Zelda early this year, like I always tell myself, Nintendo can't do wrong with Zelda. They always get it right.
Right.
Like even with something like Skyward Sword, but like then like Breath of the Wild like just blew away my expectations on that. Now in terms of like 15, I go in thinking, just be on the baseline with it. If it gets better, it gets better. If it gets worse, it gets worse. And 15 was weird because it went all over the place. Like sometimes I was really enjoying it, and then other times it's like, why do this? And other times it's like, did I really just have to watch a movie and an anime to get what's going on here, and I still don't completely get what's going on here?
Right. Well, that's just it too, because when I first played it, it came out late November. I waited like 2 weeks to get it, just because I had some stuff going on at the time, and I knew like a couple weeks into December, I knew I'd have this like unrestrained time to just dive in. I didn't want to get it and have to like not play it for 3 days and then play it again. I didn't want to do that whole thing. I wanted to be able to, reminisce like I was 12 again and just dive in for, 5 hours a day. So I waited, and once I played it, I dived in. I didn't watch the movie. I didn't watch the anime for like half the game. And I think it would have been better if I actually didn't watch the extended media, because I kept thinking the whole time, like, oh, this doesn't really make sense. But I bet if I watched the movie and the anime, this would make sense, right? And, once we got to, what was it, Chapter 8 or Chapter 9, when the story kind of transitions from the open world, and then it moves into the train where it just goes straight till the end, and it gets a lot more linear, I'm thinking like, wow, things are happening. I'm not quite catching up with all these things. Things aren't really working out. So I went and watched the movie, and I watched the anime, and I think that's the biggest thing that like really stuck with me, was like these two things, like they seem like they like didn't really connect too well. Events happened in Kingsglaive that didn't affect the story in the main game, and it didn't work. I mean, I think Brotherhood, the anime, was a little bit better, but Kingsglaive and the main game itself really just were pretty conflicting. I think the main thing that hit me the hardest was Gladiolus and Iris, their dad. He died in Kingsglaive, and it wasn't really addressed in the main game at all. I mean, I think there was a moment when Noctis was going to go fight Titan. Noctis said, like, your dad, thank you, or something like that. And Gladiolus was just like, oh, he's doing his job. But I'm just like, dude, that's it? Like, that's it. But what were your thoughts with the Kingsglaive and the game itself? Do you think they benefited each other? Or do you think it hurt it more than it helped? Or
it hurt it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Okay, so the beginning of the game for 15 is they're pushing a car, and they're and listening to Stand By Me in the process, which is it's like, okay, that's a very awkward song to pick for a Final Fantasy.
Well, let me stop you right there, because I was thinking that same thing. I was thinking like, man, like I guess this kind of works, but like, from an American's point of view, Stand By Me, it's kind of a romantic song. Like I would do that with like my girlfriend or something. Like I wouldn't do that with like my buds. So I was like, is this like a localization issue? But yeah, sorry. I just wanted to get that out there. Go ahead.
Okay, so almost every Final Fantasy, we start with like a huge bang in a way. Like Final Fantasy X, Titus, the Blitzball getting attacked by Sin.
Right.
We have the theater play. Even 12, we have like a war going on. Like something crazy awesome is going on that immediately hooks you in.
Mm-hmm.
And like even 13 had like an exciting train heist that was going on. That was like really cool and like immediately engages you. And then 15 has you pushing a car with your friends, and it's trying to be some artsy message about brotherhood and stuff like that. But here is what I think would have been better. First off, Kingsglaive, the entirety of Kingsglaive should have been the beginning of 15. what is his name, Styx or something like that? I can't remember the main character's name from...
Oh, Nyx?
That should have been Noctis in some way or another.
Right.
Kingsglaive should have just been like a known elite army in there. It should have been like the main focus. This would have been our opportunity to get to know Insomnia.
Mm-hmm.
Get to know Noctis's and Regis's relationship with one another. This was our opportunity to get to know how Noctis, Ignis, Gladios, and Prompto act with each other
right
on normal basis before they go out to their adventure. And the only thing we get is them with the king saying, alright, you need to go find Luna and, like, marry her. And it's like, okay, off the adventure we go. Now, if you got that, and then you had the events that happened where the Empire took over, Noctis was powerless and saw his father die. And of course we have, like, flashback scenes of Noctis and his father together, and we see some tension with them at their current age. So we see that there's a form of tension, but they like each other, which is what they try to convey in the game. And if we had all of that, we saw that giant knight that was in the movie, just kill him, that would have been like a heavy motivation for Noctis when he's going out, finding these weapons, wanting to fight the Empire. Like, that would have put a high emotional stake. And there's his brothers wanting to join him and go on that adventure, and he would think like, okay, if I go find Luna at Tenebrae, or go with Core and find these weapons, and then meet Luna on the way, I think that probably would have been much better. And it would have set up the final dungeon, which was Insomnia, and you would have had a more emotional impact of seeing how Insomnia is now than it was when it was in the beginning.
I think you're really hitting it on the head there, because I think really what the game struggled with is showing that motivation of really why the Empire was bad. I mean, I think one reason why Arden, the main villain, comes across so well is because you actually have there's a fair amount of things that happen that you actually see in the game, where it's like, okay, I could see why we don't like this guy, right? But with the Empire and just say, like you said, setting up that motivation, actually seeing your father killed, that would have been at least an emotional impact in the beginning of the game that would have, kind of got the ball rolling in the first half. I mean, think about it from, like, let's say Final Fantasy X's perspective. Titus sees Sin over and over and over again, just murdering people, killing people. It sets it up like this is bad, right? It's just annihilating towns. Right in the beginning, Kilika Island, I think, or something like that, right? It just annihilates the entire thing. And it's just like, it sets that up in your mind to where you can see, okay, Sin is bad, and we need to take care of this. I mean, Titus literally says, I found it horrifying. Final Fantasy VI, you see the Empire taking over cities. There's holes in the wall. Like, you talk to citizens, they're like, welcome to the town that got taken over. There's a sense of dread going on. And not being able to see your home city being taken over, I think they really lost a lot of emotional impact for the game. Honestly, I enjoy, a lot of people enjoy the first half of the game, and I found the second half of the game a lot more enjoyable because I felt like, there was actually stuff going on that I could actually connect with. And the first half of the game seemed to resonate a lot, like you were saying, on things that happened in Kingsglaive that just I didn't get to witness. I think you're exactly right. I think Nyx should have been Noctis, and we should have seen that beginning. I mean, the whole introduction was fairly lackluster. I mean, first off, it starts off with a spoiler. You see him in the future, which I picked up on. I guess a couple people didn't, but I thought it was fairly obvious.
Necessary also. I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were trying to go for like a big bombastic opening, which kind of fell short because you're like, wait, like, did they change Noctis's model? Is he older now? And then it's like, oh, okay, that was in the future. I mean, the whole like thing with his father, like, I thought that was a fairly good scene, but kind of it just stopped real early once they hit the road. I was just like, wait, is that it? Like, so I think originally from what I was reading was they were planning on having the whole game start in Insomnia and everything like that, but they were just having a hard time getting it to run, and they felt like the city was bottlenecking everything, so that's kind of why they made the movie, which makes sense, but I don't know why you wouldn't introduce your main character in the movie.
Even if you look in the early promotional trailers for 15, the more recent ones when they started actually developing the game, like with the current engine and stuff they were using, like they had them fighting in Insomnia, like before Dark World,
Yeah.
And none of that is in the game. That's another thing. Just a lot of stuff you see from trailers that's just not in the game.
Right. And that would be okay if what I got was like good, you know?
Yeah. And to add on top of your sense of dread comment, besides seeing Insomnia from a distance being taken over by the Empire, did you truly feel the Empire's presence anywhere else in the game?
No, I mean, I thought it was kind of cool, like that they would have like the Empire drop Magitech soldiers down every now and again. I mean, I thought that was kind of cool, but generally speaking, I felt like when I was walking around, I felt like there should have been like soldiers in towns harassing people. Like I should have been seeing them kicking people out of shops and stuff. Like, I should have seen something going on. Like, Noctis should have had to, like, change his outfit or something. There should have been something going on that would actually lead me to... Like, it seemed so weird that we didn't even meet anybody, really, from Insomnia. He doesn't seem like a prince at all, like, you know?
Yeah, a lot of times that seemed like I was bothering the Empire more than the Empire is bothering me. Because, like, even when we went to Alticia, they try to make the excuse that, well, the Empire lets us run things the way we want to, but they ultimately have a say in our government and our rules and everything. So that's your excuse of why you don't see him in Alticia. But like even then, like everywhere else, it's like you would expect more than just simple camps here and there. You would expect like if the Empire's been taken over like they have, you should see a stronger presence of them even in smaller areas. But that's just the thing. We don't have any prominent areas in the game besides like 2 cities. And the end when we go to the Empire, which we can't even explore, we go inside the one building and witness a car. It's like we don't have a real strong sense of like you said, no strong sense of dread anywhere. I don't feel the Empire's presence except when we go in and actually mess with it.
Right. Well, the thing is that they try to show scenes like with when you finally in chapter 13 where you get to see, you know, like where the Empire is and everything. They try to show, or my bad, was that in the Empire or was that in Insomnia? I can't remember.
He loses his powers and he has to climb the tower with like only a ring in hand.
Right. But that took place in the Empire, right?
It did take place in the main Empire building. It's kind of hard to say. It's like their research facility / throne room.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Well, it seemed weird to me that they tried to emphasize, like, oh, look how terrible it's gotten here. But I really feel like if they're going to do that type of, you know, if they're trying to elicit that emotional response, they need to show us, like, what it was like beforehand, you know?
Yeah, on top of that, they need to show us how powerful the Empire is. We don't get to explore that city either, which is kind of sad because if you actually look through the data, but like someone actually went through the data mines and was able to get Noctis into what was considered the 3rd region, like the 3rd major region.
Right.
Which was the Empire's area. They did have intent, or at least tried out an Empire heavily occupied by the Empire. Or an area by the Empire, but it seems like they probably, time constraint, they probably took that out. And that's probably the whole thing with the whole linear thing after that, which you are right, the story is more focused that point, but it's kind of like already too late at that point to get things really going.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I recently replayed the game again, and I tried to come at it from a more, okay, like some people enjoyed this. Let me just ignore the things that I don't like, and let me focus on the things I do like. And I honestly, dude, even as being objective as I could, I really think that first half of the game is just so, like, for a plot, is just so poorly done. I mean, just to, like, focus this conversation a little bit, in the first half, I mean, we go from, like, you seeing your father died, and then for some reason, like, I guess, okay, you're going to go collect all the weapons, but then, like, all of a sudden, the Regalia gets taken, and you're like, oh, let's go rescue the car. And I'm like, dude, the entire planet hangs on you, like, apparently conquering the Empire, and you're going to go risk your life for a car? I see cars all over the place, you know? So we spent an entire mission, like, trying to rescue a car, and then, like, they kill the butler guy, Jared. Let's go avenge Jared. And I'm like, dude, why are you guys, like, this game is so thinly laid out with plot. Why are you spending so much time rescuing the car and then, like, avenging some guy I don't even know, you know?
What the problem with the car is, if you want to strongly symbolize the car as Regis's and Noctis's relationship, that's fine. The problem is they didn't do that. Alright, there was a trailer, a CG trailer that they showed, I think a year or two before the game came out.
Right.
It was Regis and Noctis when he was younger. He was holding Noctis in his arms, and it seemed like a very emotional scene, and they're in front of the car. And they do give, hints that, Noctis, it was a comfort zone or a safe zone for Noctis with his father and such, but they don't strongly show that. So when they say something like, we need to go save the car, it's you don't, the player doesn't care about the car.
Well, I don't know. I think to me, though, it's an inanimate object. I don't think, I think that there's a very limited amount that I would actually care about the car. You know?
I'm talking more about developer intent.
Yeah, I got you.
The thing with the car may have had a little more impact if, there was actually relationship between Noctis and Regis. Oh, by the way, you get a phone call. Oh yeah, hey, by the way, your dad died. And it's oh, well, that sucks. And, alright, now let's go catch those frogs that we were talking about.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like it was they already had a lot of the footage too. It seems like it's such a good opportunity because they spend so much time camping and you always have to stay at hotels. Every time you went to bed, they could have had a random counter that would now's the chance it'll show a little cutscene of you, when you were younger with your dad or whatever, or they could have showed some with Luna. I mean, they could have done a lot of things with that whenever you're sleeping. I feel like they could have done, since the whole city's called Insomnia, the fact that when he sleeps, he could have had this whole dream thing going on and just, they could have used a lot of just memories. I feel like they could have utilized that a lot better.
How I would have done the car scene a lot better.
Okay.
This is, of course, has to be after Noctis finds out Regis' dad dies. This has to be a little later down the line. You find out that your car has been taken by the Empire, and Noctis wants to go get it back. Only Noctis wants to get it back.
Sure.
And the other three are baffled on why Noctis wants to really go out of his way for his car. It's Noctis, why do you want to go out and get this car? It's an inanimate object. It's not anything. You're rich. You can go get a new one. And then, when they're going through, they're disgruntled, but, Noctis is a prince. They're going to follow him. And then while they're in the middle of it, while they're, knee deep in trouble, they're all just, overly frustrated with him. It's that's it. We're not getting the car. I don't care if you're the prince or not. We're not going to do it. That's when Noctis gets into an over-emotional scene where he screams at them saying that it's not just about the car. It was the only thing my dead father has truly left me behind. It is all I have left.
Mm-hmm.
My kingdom is gone. I have no control over that anymore. The city is pretty much done. The car is the only thing I had left of my father. And now that is going to be gone also. That is what made the car feel important.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things they could have done. I think that would have been a lot better than just rescue the car. Go find a chocobo. I mean, honestly, I felt like they could have tied that mission up with the whole Avenge Jared thing. I mean, all they had to do was okay, the car was taken. Let's go back to Lestalem. You go back there. You see the Empire beating up Jared. Iris is trying to run after him. Of course, Gladiolus runs after his sister. And, the Empire takes his sister and Gladiolus back to a base. Noctis is in, Ignis and Prompto are okay, let's go rescue them. You get some one-on-one time, brother and sister. They can talk about their dad dying. And in the process, the car just happens to be there. I mean, there's a lot of things they could have done. And it just seems weird that they didn't, I don't know. It seems weird to say for a supposedly 10-year game, but the plot just seems very rushed. But how did you feel about the whole Luna thing? Did you feel like they explored that character enough? Did that relationship make sense to you? Or what were your thoughts with that?
Oh, just like my answer for most of the game. It's just wasted potential. I don't even know why they needed to... I mean, I don't care that they changed it from Stella to Luna, because I barely knew Stella before.
Yeah, to me, it's the same character. They just changed the name.
Yeah, I mean, it's... Like I said, it's wasted potential. There's so much that she could have done. And she was gone as soon as we saw her. We saw her in a couple flashback scenes.
Right.
For kids. But we never got to see a relationship between them as adults. we get that small screen time between them two. And again, like, her death scene was very beautiful looking. Like, it could...
Yeah, that was honestly a great scene. It just... I didn't know what was going on, but...
But it's like, I just didn't care. Like, this isn't Eris from 7. Like, we didn't get screen time with this person.
Yeah.
Like, we all felt something emotional when Eris died, or I'm sorry guys, spoilers.
Final Fantasy VII spoiler, but I'm pretty sure at this point we're good.
Yeah. But, I mean, we got no screen time with her. Or at least, I think maybe a way you could have made it work in that sense is if you had Noctis heavily believe that, like, he had to go see Luna, like, he's in love with Luna, and then the rest of his party is like, you know, you barely know Luna, I don't know why you're getting so worked up over this. And then Noctis gets more and more worked up over the course of the game, and Luna's not more of a prominent character, but more of a, you know, as a target or a goal for Noctis.
Right.
So if we got to that part where we see her taken away from him, it wouldn't have to be necessarily Luna we cared about, if we cared that Noctis lost something he really wanted.
Well, I think they could have tied it up, too, with his father. Like, if his father just looked at him, last thing he ever said to him was, Luna, like, protect Luna or something like that. I don't know. Like, they could have tied it up with, okay, like, my father died. The last thing he told me was to protect her or seek her out. But honestly, to me, it just seems strange that, like, her brother was the high commander of the the people that, like, killed your dad. And, like, my immediate reaction if I was Noctis would have been like, was she on, like, in on it? Like, you know, I haven't seen her in 12 years. Or I don't know how long it's been. It's been a long time, but it just seemed forced. I thought the whole thing with I saw what they were trying to do with how they were trying to build the relationship where Umbra would come and give him a little book and he'd get to write her a little message. And it was supposed to be like, oh, they had this little letter thing going back and forth. But I mean, even that, the dialogue was corny. It would just be like, I'll see you soon. You know, I don't know. I've never been able to, like, pick up a girl with, like, a single line like that. It just didn't seem very believable.
At least it would be something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did have the little... How'd you feel about the little book thing going back and forth where they would write each other?
They have cell phones.
Yeah. Why aren't you using a cell phone?
I bet you anything that immediately pops with, like, most people's heads. And Tabata actually tried to answer an interview. It's like, it's cute how they do it, or royalty doesn't have, like, cell phone access to each other or something like that. I'm like, you know that he just came up with that right off the top of his head. It's like,
yeah,
you're not fully needing one Tabata.
Well, yeah, come on, Tabata. There's several scenes in the game where, like, everyone uses a cell phone too. Like, freaking Noctis calls Core on a cell phone. Gladiolus calls Core on a cell phone. Like, seems like you can call Core on a cell phone. You just can't call anybody else.
Come on, even I would like you aim to message her before putting in a book and giving it to a dog.
Yeah. Well, and how old is Noctis supposed to be? Like 19?
Noctis, I believe,
or 20? 21? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. Like, to me, like, I would have been a little rebellious, you know? Oh, I know I'm not supposed to use a cell phone, but I use one, you know, when no one's looking.
That one's a little bit of a nitpick, though. I mean, it's funny, but I don't think it harms anything with that.
Yeah, I mean, they could have easily came up with, like, a legitimate excuse. I mean, all it needed maybe was, like, a little scene where, like, Noctis drops his phone in the water or something, like, or, like, they can track the cell phone or something.
Even said, like, oh, they know they can use cell phones or not, but, like, there's some deep symbol in the meaning of when they were kids and they were handing it to each other, and that's the way they, you know, like to do it and not break tradition.
Right.
I'll be like, okay, that's kind of a dumb reason, but it makes sense. Like, that's fine.
It is interesting, though, because on my second playthrough, I kind of got the vibe that Tabata was going for the you're expecting a relationship to build, you're looking forward to a relationship building, and right when you think it's about to happen, they take her away from you. And that works a little bit better for me if I look at it from that perspective. But that's not what I would have done. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I agree with you.
Yeah. So, all right, we've dealt with the whole beginning of the game pretty much, and we've kind of covered Luna. From there, how did you feel about the whole Gladiolus thing and the all the DLCs, did you feel like those were critical story points, or are you okay with the game not including those story points in the main game? Or
at first, I refused to acknowledge them at all.
Mm-hmm.
But for the sake of being able to discuss it here, I delved in them a little bit. Gladiolus, not as much. That's kind of his own thing that didn't really contribute to the story. Prompto's had potential to be part of the story, and I think it is for him alone.
Right.
I think it's relative to bring to the story, because, in the main game, it's like, guys, I'm actually one of these things that got created.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was sent to someone's home, became a fat kid, and then lost weight and became. That's like, that's good. Which is, I guess it's fine. Everything. I mean, that's cool, but it's just like in the main game, he's like, then like after like a few sentences, they're like, that's cool, man. Hey, no biggie.
Yeah, there's no issue. I think that's kind of one thing. I feel like the guys got along a little too well. Gladiolus and Noctis kind of got into it for a little bit, and that was actually
that was forced.
Yeah, it was forced, but at least it wasn't like the same. Like, hey, Noct, you're such a great guy. Yeah, I know. Like, it was a little bit something a little bit different. But I felt like they could have dealt with the Prompto thing a little bit better too. I did play the DLC, and I gotta admit, though, I did enjoy the DLC, I think, better than the actual game itself. Now, that's not to say I thought the DLC was great, the Prompto DLC, but so far I've been impressed with the quality of them. I think the story is kind of like, especially the Gladiolus one, it was kind of dumb. Like, I thought, really, like, we have some chance on some character depth here, and we go to Gilgamesh. But did it strike you as odd when Gladiolus just left the plot for...
Like, even if you count the DLC in, it's so random that he decided to go out and do that.
Yeah.
And when he comes back with a major scar on his head, they're like, oh, hey, Gladiolus, you're back. Hey, what's up with the scar? And he's like, well, that's one. Huh? All right. Back to our journey. And, like, the same thing with Prompto. It's like, oh, hey, Prompto, you're back. It's like, oh, you're one of these demons here? That's cool. All right, let's keep going with the journey. And for Prompto's case, I think it would have been better if they were all together when they did it. I think that's a major problem with chapter 13 in general, is that they all should have been together experiencing this.
Yeah.
Like, Prompto should have been freaking out. It should have been like Ariala telling Prompto to calm down. It should have been the three characters telling him to calm down. Like, she can be present, she can offer her perspective, which is cool.
Yeah.
I love Ariala. She's one of the best parts of the game.
Right.
But that would have worked for that. But and Gladiolus's DLC, his case, I can't really find a way to properly integrate that without it just being a forced scene to give something to Gladiolus.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels so pointless. Have the perspective that he is a tough guy and he knows how to hold himself in a battle. We don't need that to prove it.
Well, it seemed so odd that they're like, oh, like, I got beat by the High Commander, and they show this like flashback of like Ravis just pushing him against the car, and I'm like, well, dude, you didn't really get beat. Like, you didn't fight at all. Like, he just caught you off footing. Like, that seems like an odd motivation to just leave the party. But I played the DLC, and honestly, like, I think it felt more like a core DLC than it did a Gladiolus DLC. I learned a lot about core. I learned about Core's past, like, all the things I wanted to know about Gladio. I didn't get to learn. I learned those things about Core. But I'm with you, man. It seemed really odd that he just left the party, and it felt really strange that it didn't really explain it. As far as like the Prompto DLC being like they should have done it together. I mean, I think the biggest thing is how they handled it, especially before the DLC came out, because Chapter 13 was so long, it was so tedious. And with most Final Fantasy games, when you have a long, tedious part like that, eventually there's going to be some kind of payoff with some serious plot development. And for them to just cover the whole, I'm a robot, basically, or whatever, like I was created in a lab, it seems so strange that they just covered it in one sentence. And everyone was like, yeah, don't worry about it. I think that's kind of the name of the whole game, really. It just missed opportunity.
Yeah, it's just it's such a rushed game. like if you actually total in how much of the main story is actually in the game, it's barely there.
Yeah, it's
like the most story you get is on the second half. The first half, it's very spread out.
Yeah, I mean, I think like cutscene wise, it's barely 6 hours, and that's pretty freaking small. If you look at like Final Fantasy X, that's like 10 hours. 13 was like 12 hours. That's cutscenes and that's dialogue going on. And I'm not saying like I need a ton of it, but they could have done some more with that. I mean, the game's only 19 hours. You could beat it in 19 hours if you want to. So, I mean, I don't know, it seems kind of small.
6 hours is fine if you can make it a really good 6 hours.
Yeah.
They weren't. It's like there's just so many things they wanted to tell, and they weren't taking time to tell each one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we never get that feeling of the relationship between Regis and Noctis. We never truly get that feeling of, like, them as four, quote-unquote, brothers together. We don't get the time to get a sense of the world. It's just like, it's just like it is. It's like a road trip. It's like you're reading signs. Like you're trying to read a sign while you're driving by. It's like, oh man, I missed the second half.
Maybe I'll look at it later. Yeah. How did you feel about because I think the main intent for the game was the relationship between the main characters. Did that resonate with you? That resonated with a lot of people that I've talked to.
I think that part was fine. I think they did have some good moments, like if you rest at it and, you get a scene with Noctis and Prompto. I think the build-up of their relationship was fine. I think it just could have been better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can give you a specific example, if we want to delve into a part of the final fight, just for the sake of talking about them as a brother together. Like, at the end, it's like a big flashy light show against Arden.
Right.
And that's essentially it.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you what would have been much better there is at the end, when all four of them are together, Noctis is forced into a solo fight with Arden. Even though they give like a speech to go and do it together. After you do the light show with Arden and the solo fight with Arden, which is fine.
Right.
There needed to be something more there. And like every traditional Final Fantasy, there's some big manifestation final boss.
Yeah.
It would have made sense if Arden, all his demons inside of him, finally got the best of him, and he became that.
Yeah, this seemed strange. Like of the one Final Fantasy where it would have made sense for like the main villain to turn into some like hideous beast at the end, he just stays himself.
Then that's the part where all three of your brothers come in and say, this is something we can only do us four together.
Right.
And then they all join together, and you're having like the ultimate final battle with your brother. And this is something that would have just nailed it right there. Like, this is something only they can do together. This is where their relationship has brought them to.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been so much more better. Or, man, that word's been so much better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think mainly, like, just to top that off, I feel like the main, like, the dialogue while you're running back and forth, just between the bros, like, I felt like that was pretty well done. I liked that, like, some of the audio lines were actually sequenced with events that just happened. That seemed well done. I think the biggest thing I don't like about it, though, is just none of it's, like, scripted. I don't want to say scripted, but none of it just seems so random for me, so it didn't really work for me because it just felt like if I played it again, I might not have the same experience. But I think that's kind of like, I could see what they're trying to do to build that relationship. And I like what you were going with, just, adding some more scenes in the main plot itself to kind of beef up that relationship. I think, that would have really built the game a lot. But how do you feel, just to keep this moving here, how did you feel about the World of Ruin?
The World of Ruin? It had so much potential, and let's say it got ruined.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was so excited when I first saw this. I was thinking to myself, oh, wow, this must be like the second half of the game.
I thought the same thing, too. I was like, oh, wow, we're at the 50% point.
There's going to be a bunch of cool new dungeons to explore. We get to see how the world the whole 18 miles of the world that we just explored now in ruins, and we get probably this stuff where we see like a mega weapon and stuff like that.
Right.
Some like really cool side quest dungeons before we go to the final. No, all we did was walk a little bit, see some monsters around, get picked up by the kid who liked to collect little toys. I forgot, like little cat car toys. I think.
Oh, Talcott.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a very very important character.
yes. I mean, I like that. It was a nice little touch.
I felt like it should have been Core that picked you up.
Yeah. We get there and we're like, okay, so we get everything that's going on. It's like they've been fighting this for 10 years. And then we get stuff that says like, oh, Cindy's around, but the developers didn't want to take time to make her look older. So we kind of just put her to the side and just said she's like depressed.
Yeah,
or something.
but they didn't even take time to make anyone else look older. They just gave like, they either gave them a soul patch or like they like made their hair a little longer. And I'm like, dude, this isn't like 2 years. This is like a decade. You know? I mean, Noctis came back looking like Keanu Reeves, but I mean, you know.
How many people wanted to see Iris the Demon Slayer?
I know, you can't just throw it at.
And we never got to see her. All we got to say was like, oh, she's like one of those badass demon hunters out there. I'm like, I want to see this. I remember cool little teenage Iris that like had a crush on Noctis, and now we see her. Now we hear that she's a badass demon hunter.
Yeah, and apparently she travels the world with Core now. Apparently, just slaying demons together. I'm like, dude, this sounds like a great game. Why are we not seeing this?
Give me DLC of that.
Yeah, don't all the like character dramas. Those should have been the game, and the DLC should have been stuff like that. You know, with like Iris and Core.
And if I want to go off subject for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
The DLC should have been stuff like that, like Iris the Demon Slayer with Core doing content, or you beat Ariala and you do content with her with like Biggs and Wedge saving people.
Right.
Like, this is stuff that should have been DLC. I would have been fine with that being DLC because that's like side stories. That you can take in.
Let's take it back to like Final Fantasy VII, right? What they did in Final Fantasy 15 would have been equivalent to if they like had like Barrett DLC, right? So like the whole like him going back to like falling in the prison and like dealing with dying and like, you know, finding out about Marlena and everything, like dealing with all that. If that was just DLC, if that wasn't in the regular game, if they're like, oh yeah, you can buy it later, you know, or like the whole like Tifa thing and the whole background. What's that?
Oh no, I was just kidding around. I was like, oh hey Barrett, where you been? No, kill the best friend.
Yeah.
That was the actual father of my daughter. It's like, oh, yeah, oh, that's cool. All right, back to the gold saucer.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what that game actually gave out, I guess, as you could say, DLC was, you know, was like Crisis Core. That was a prequel. Then you had, Dirge Cerberus. I mean, those were things that kind of like made sense to be DLC if you wanted to do it. But it seems strange that they chose to do it with the main characters. But to get back to our original point, we got off topic there, but the second playthrough, I tried to stay out as long as I could in the World of Ruin. I thought maybe, you know, I'd get to run around, do a couple of things. Maybe I might be able to spark a new story element I haven't seen before. But no, it's pretty forced. So I'm hoping that they're going to do some kind of DLC with that. That would be something that I'd really look forward to. Just to close this off, though, how did you feel about Arden?
Arden himself, I thought was an awesome villain.
I agree.
It goes back to it had fantastic potential, just executed poorly. He is like everything about him I like. He's very charismatic. He's very surprisingly down to earth for a villain.
Right.
He knows how to keep his cool and everything, and he doesn't just like come off as like just a villain. Like, you just kind of question yourself, like, who he is and what his real motives are. And you're even wondering if it's like, is he the actual main villain or is he just someone? And that stuff fascinates me. But the thing I don't like is how they try to explain his origin story. Like, that was so messy. And you try to learn it through, like, pamphlets you find on the floor.
Well,
like subtle hits here and there.
I thought when he started to explain, like, he's like, oh, do you know who I am or something like that? And he says his actual name and everything. I thought that was a really cool moment. However, man, you had to be heavily invested in the lore to like really get what was going on there, you know?
Exactly.
And so it's exactly like you said, you had to read all the little pamphlets, you know, you had to read the Ultimania and everything else to really see what was going on. But I mean, I think honestly, he's really that character itself is really the high point of the whole game. I mean, he's the one character there's not too much that I have to complain about. Just that maybe I would want to know a little bit more.
Let me tell you about 15 in general is that I like each of the characters in their own way.
Sure.
It's like you were given a puzzle piece and like all the pieces are there to make a great game. It's just they just did a poor job with each one of them. Like each character I find interest in each of it. I don't think there's a particular character I truly hate. It's just they're just all done so poorly. It's just how relationships grow and it's just so all poorly done.
Yeah, I think that's really the main point there that I'm thinking. I feel the exact same way. I like every character that I meet. And I just want to know more, right? Like, so it's like they did a good job setting them up, but it's just like, I want to know more. And the fact that I finished the whole game, not really knowing more, it just left a salty taste in my mouth. I didn't feel like I really got a story.
Yeah, I mean, and having, like, if for it to be, like, the second last boss, and then Arden being, like, a light show final boss that, like, I don't feel like I got the full potential of Arden. Like, I mean, his design is really cool. I think he himself is really cool. I love the scenes that he is in. And I just love how manipulative he is to people. I mean, I think he was, like, a really well-designed character. It's just, like you said, you had to read really heavily into the lore to get how he is. Like, even then, in the game, it's like, people were questioning if he was truly, like, the original Lucius Calum, or did he, like...
just lie.
Or more was it, that he is the original Lucius Calum, but was the person who inherited him also a Lucius Calum, or did they steal it from him? It's like, we don't get a clear definition of these answers. Like, even after reading the lore and everything, and people are debating on the internet left and right, and it's not like a clever hidden thing, it's just, no one knew. It's like, oh, will this happen? Will this happen? Like, well, no one can answer it because it's just too vague.
Yeah, and like, no one really reacted to it either, you know?
And why would you tell us that, like, he has all these demons in him, and then not do anything with it? It's like, okay, you can say he went, like, a little crazy from it, but here's the thing, he's justified in his craze, and, you know, him wanting to get back at them.
Right.
And it doesn't really seem too crazy in the grand scope of things, so you needed a little something to make him think, okay, this is a little too crazy.
Well, let's think about this, and this is going to be a little bit of a Final Fantasy VII spoiler. So I apologize about that. But think about Sephiroth, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of time seeing him as a normal dude. So when you finally do see the series of scenes where he loses his mind and goes nuts, you know, I felt like it had a pretty big impact. And I think there's a lot of parallels with Arden there. I mean, Arden was supposed to be a fairly good guy. I mean, he was going around kind of like Luna, healing people. He was basically taking other people's demons and putting them in himself. And he just did it so much that it caused him to go insane. I mean, it said he was so contaminated that he couldn't die because, like, the afterlife wouldn't accept him. I mean, like, Jesus Christ, that's, like, pretty bad.
Yeah. It was like the Eidolons of the game.
Right.
Like, decided that he is too much of a risk, so that's what triggered the insanity. But to them, that, like, because it's kind of hard to say, because Arden's perspective is that he believes he was completely sane and they kicked him out.
Mm-hmm.
It makes him feel that he's justified with it, but that's his perspective. It could have been very well that the Eidolons saw that he was out of control, and the person that Lucius Calum was given to, like, we're saying, like, okay, I think he's going a little overboard now, and we got to get him out.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say. I guess that's up to player interpretation on that, how that ended up. But I think the way Arden explains it is just, like, purely his version, and looking at it from a different perspective, because he's the one explaining it. So obviously, he's going to make it sound like he's the one in the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, of course, it's going to be from his perspective. I mean, I do feel like I would have liked if we would have got to actually speak with some of the gods a little bit more. Shiva, I know she was running around as Gentiana and stuff, but I mean, it would have been interesting to kind of see their take on everything Arden said. Just like, hey, this is what we saw that happened, or something like that. But I mean, I don't know. Overall, the Arden character itself, though, I feel like they did a fairly good job with it. I feel like you actually saw some, like, I don't want to call it character development, but it starts off with like you're not really knowing who he is, and then over the course of time he gets more and more evil. It did seem strange that Ignis didn't recognize him when they first ran into him, didn't it?
Yeah, again, it's just poor writing.
Yeah, we're just gonna walk around with this guy. Screw it.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about the very ending cutscene?
Yeah, let's do it. So the end of the game, are you talking about after you beat Ifrith and then you beat Arden? It takes you to the final scene where, well, first off, what picture did you choose?
I was heavily tempted to pick the cup of noodles. I did pick the picture of them before they go on the boat ride.
Yeah.
And they're all like a family-like picture.
Yeah.
For the sake of immersion, that I just picked that. Yeah,
that's the one I ended up picking, but I was so tempted. There was this like really great shot of Cindy with like, it shows her breasts and everything, like you get like right at the beginning. I was like, dude, it would be hilarious, because I just figured this was going to come up as important. It would be hilarious if I just chose that. And I kind of wish I did, because that would have been classic for Noctis to just pull that out and show it to Luna. But I was hoping that the ending of the game might resurrect some feelings for me. But I ended up choosing the whole group shot with everyone. So
yeah, I had a potential to pick Gladiolus' butt also.
Yeah, that just would have been classic. Oh my god. So after that, Noctis walks into finally the throne room you've been trying to get to the whole time. And he finally sits down into it. He reclaimed his throne. I feel like he did a pretty poor job reclaiming it, because the whole city's trashed. The whole world's descended into darkness. But I whatever. He got there. He took his time, but he got there. So he's sitting down, and then all the kings, right? All the kings of Lucius appear, and they all have to take their turn, like stabbing him, I guess, or trying to kill him. Was that your interpretation?
Yeah, I guess he was just ending the line or whatnot to completely kill off Arden or something.
Yeah.
I don't 100% understand that. I mean, people are free to help me on that. But the way I took it is that in general that he was just completely taking Arden out of the picture.
Yeah, so from what I understand, they had to kill the last in the line in order to stop Arden from like reviving himself, apparently. Or like apparently if they destroyed the ring or something like that, like it would finally stop Arden from coming back for good. But I mean, I thought that the whole scene with all the kings, and finally like his father's there, and he kind of hesitates for a moment before he finally is like, okay, I'll stab him too or whatever. I thought that was kind of a moving scene, and then all the bros together kind of finish off Arden. But you're talking about the final scene where all the guys are at the campsite. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, which I thought was I thought it was a good scene. I mean, it was sad and everything that your interpretation is that like Noctis killed himself and stuff like that, and that was sad. And it was a nice little spectacle of him with the version of heaven as him with Luna together in a in a Final Fantasy like ending.
Right.
But like the reality was that he killed himself and stuff like that. The story itself, like, it felt hard because this was supposed to tie up the relationship between him and Regis, especially when he's asking his father, who was also one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's like, come on, Dad, you gotta do this. And, I felt absolutely nothing from that. I'm like, I never got anything from these two characters to begin with. And, the most insulting thing on top of that is that Tabata once said about the ending is, it should be your own interpretation on how these characters, or what happened to Noctis or these characters at the end. Or like, did Prompto, Ignis, and Gladiolus also die?
Oh,
the question people had. And guess what? I think like a few weeks ago, he clarified and said, by the way, they all live. Not Noctis, I mean, the three of them live.
Yeah.
Like, great, thanks. What happened to oh, just make your own interpretation of it before.
Let me tell you about that decision.
You don't know your own story. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think what happened there was, because I feel like the story made a lot more sense if all of them died. Or not more sense, it just a lot more, like, emotionally it would have been a little more satisfying, as odd as that sounds, if they all died. At least for me, anyways. However, I think when Tabata was saying, oh, it's up to your interpretation, you know, you get that little discussion out there. Everyone's on the forums and everything talking. But I think now that he's come out and said, oh, no, they lived. To me, that tells me that Square Enix thought about it. And they're like, dude, we could have some spin-offs.
Yes. Yes.
Because I can already see like a Prompto spin-off. Apparently Ignis is getting real popular now, so I could see something with that. Which I don't know if I'll dive into those or not, but...
thing that Tabata has ever said in an interview is that when people call him out for like the missing cutscenes or the missing story content that was needed, or call him out for it being an incomplete game, he actually said, oh, that's because everything was supposed to be done from Noctis's point of view. Purely from Noctis's point of view. And so,
yeah.
Tabata, we're all going to call you out on this one. Like, there's scenes where Noctis isn't there. There's scenes with Luna healing people. There's a scene with the Empire discussing their empire-y things. It's like, no, you need to admit that there were some problems. You, as a director, were not able to cut corners like a good director would be able to. And I'm not going to say I know what happened back at Square Enix, and I mean, I don't know if it was truly 100% fault, which I doubt it.
Well, it can't be, right?
I truly believe that a good director could have made this work and made it feel complete with the time constraints they have.
Well, let's...
With Square Enix with a boot up in them. And I think a really good director would have been like, okay, we can still make this work with the time constraints we have.
I think, like, look at somebody like Katase, right? Look at him with Final Fantasy VIII. Like, that thing came out in, like, a year. And it had some story problems. But, like, really, the story problems for me, and we're not going to get in a huge discussion about that, but it just seemed like they kind of, like, a lot of, like, coincidences, you know, a lot of scenes where you're like, really? Did it really work out like that? But at least he, like, wrapped it up, right? I think, like, you might have had something similar with if he had done this game in the supposed 3 years. But the thing with Tabata, and I think you're exactly right, it just seems like he just plain didn't, like, just like, well, we don't have enough time, so we're just not going to put that in there. And it didn't feel like a cohesive game. I mean, it seems strange because if you look at any individual scene by itself, they're all pretty well done. Like, if I had just walked into the room and you were playing the game, I'd know anything about it, and I just saw, like, Luna's death scene, right? Or if I saw the scene on the train where Arden and Shiva, right? Where she, you know, hushes him. Or, like, all these other scenes. If you see any of them individually, it seems like I would, like, walk away thinking, like, wow, this is a great game. But when you actually play the whole thing, it's not very cohesive. Like, none of the parts fit. And the whole line with Tabata saying, oh, it's from Noctis's perspective, that's a bunch of crap. Like, it's like, just like you said, there's so many scenes where Noctis is not in there. I mean, if you want to compare it to a game where it was told from the main character's perspective, Final Fantasy X, it says right in the beginning of the game, this is my story. And he's, like, narrating the whole game. You know?
Yeah. And they didn't need to make an excuse that, like, they're, like, someone's having conversation somewhere else or anything like that. I mean, it's like, you can tell it's from it's Titus's point of view, but, you know, for the sake of story, they still show what needs to be shown. And
right.
They're not saying, like, oh, this has to be 100% be Titus's perspective. It's like, they're still ultimately telling a story.
Right. They didn't go off with Kamari and then, or well, I guess they did kind of, but I mean, they didn't go off telling each character's side story. It was mainly about Titus, and right? But they gave you the scenes that it needed to tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, 15 is very pretty to look at. I mean, the cutscenes you do get are done well enough, but it's just not, you nailed it. Nothing is truly woven together. And that's hurt with the open world perspective, because you have, like, this scene of Noctis finding out his father died, and the joke I made before. Then after that, you have the option to do side quests to catch frogs, and that just immediately breaks it up. And or like a scene where like two of the party members are just like having a small little powwow with each other. Then they're like getting along, fishing and everything. That's the thing about open world games like that. You want to tell a strong Final Fantasy story.
Yeah,
is that open world does more to hurt it than it does to make it better. That's why a lot of JRPGs are more linear, is because it keeps a focus on the story.
Well, and it seems to me as if, and this is just me just trying to assess the situation and really just, pulling some thoughts out here, but it seems to me like ever since Sakaguchi left, all Square does is they overcorrect for the complaints of the previous game. I mean, Final Fantasy X came out and they complained that the dialogue was cheesy. Well, then Final Fantasy XII has this really elevated speech. Well, they said, this game's too hard to follow. There's long stretches. There's too much to do. Well, 13 was too linear. Everyone complained about 13 being linear. 15 came out and it's like, well, this open world is just ridiculous. Like, it doesn't work with the story. So it just seems like Square in general is trying to find its feet still and really, get back to what they used to do so easily,
Yeah, and again, I don't ask for a perfect game from them. Like, if something's too linear, it's too linear. Something a little too open. Because despite 12 and 13's faults, I still find them a very enjoyable experience from a point of view. And, I already get people not liking me just from saying the 13 thing also. Because I have a lot of problems with 13 like people, but I would say my experience, ultimately, I enjoyed 13.
Right.
And I can complain about that all day too, but at least it felt like a complete story.
Yeah.
Things were tied together like they were supposed to, but 15 is just, it's such a mess. And I don't get why people phrase it to death. I mean, it's your opinion. If you like story and everything, that's cool. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for thinking that, but if you're asking me what I think about it, I think it's a hot mess, and it's nowhere near the quality of storytelling and presentation that the series is known for before it. It just fails miserably in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, every game before that, if I've had issues with 12 or 13, it was always one issue. 13 was too linear. I felt like if they just fixed that one issue, it would have been a lot better. Or with 12, I felt like the main plot could have been better. If they just fixed that one thing, the game would have been that much better. But with 15, there's just so many numerous issues that I personally had. I mean, I'm glad people are enjoying it. One thing I can say that's positive is it seems like a lot of new fans are coming into the series. This is their first entry game, and for whatever reason, they really enjoyed the game, which I'm glad if anybody enjoys it. Go back and play some of those classics, and hopefully that'll entice Square to revisit storytelling.
Yeah, because as much as I bash 15, and realistically, hate is a strong word towards it. But the things I truly hate about 15 isn't necessarily from the game itself. But if we're just going to stick to talking about the story on that, the story I could say is at best good. At best, I could say okay to good. The problem is with Final Fantasy, I don't find good enough.
Sure.
This is a series that has excelled in telling excellent storytelling, dating all the way back to the 80s. And to an extent, it has nailed it every time, despite if you like 13's story or not, at least it was done, at least in my opinion, done very well.
Well, people still talk about Final Fantasy 7, even in Final Fantasy 8, people still talk about the story today, 9, 10, 13, a little bit 12 too, right? They still talk, some of these games are 20 years old and they're still talking about the plot. I just find it hard to believe that anyone's going to be talking about the story of this game, 20 years from now, outside of geez, that thing was a mess,
Yeah, and the thing with newcomers coming in and everything, I guess that's cool, that's fine. I guess if you motivate people to check earlier Final Fantasies, just with that slogan for veterans and newcomers alike, the veteran part's kind of insulting to say. It's that's what I think 15 is. It's an okay game.
Yeah. Well, let me
find okay good enough. I'm sorry, but they do have higher standards that they need to uphold if they want to keep up the franchise or keep the franchise relevant. Because if they make 16 as much of a hot mess as this, or even worse, then I truly believe that people are going to lose complete faith in the series.
I think if they butcher the Final Fantasy VII remake, I think that's probably going to be unrecoverable.
Yeah, I think the execution of the 7 remake may be fine, but the fact they make it episodic, or I think corporate decisions will hurt 7 remake the most.
Sure.
Like, let's make it episodic, or let's take this content out and this content out and make it DLC and stuff like that. That's what I feel like about 15's story. Like, you can feel a lot of, like, the higher ups coming in and just having their way with it. Like, we need some DLC. You need to go in there and take this part of the story out and try to make it work as DLC.
They'll buy it. They'll buy it anyways.
Yeah, they'll buy it anyways. We could crap in the can and put Final Fantasy 15 on and people will still buy it.
Well, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind DLC, honestly, because I realize rising costs of games, game development, and it's still being charged $60. I realize that's kind of BS for the developer. But if you're going to do that, then the DLC needs to be available on day one. Right?
Yeah, that's one thing.
And like, if Final Fantasy 16 got announced and it was like a main edition, a complete edition was like $80 day one, I would pay the $80 happily if it was going to be a complete game.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, is that the $60 you pay for, you need a complete story from start to end. It's like everything needs to be there. Whatever DLC you make needs to be additional. Like I said before, all the characters like Gladiolus, Prompto, Ignis, like their stories should be in the main game.
Sure.
And the DLC content needs to be stuff like, where is Ariana? What did Ariana do with Biggs and Wedge to save the people? What did Iris the Demon Slayer and Core do together? Because technically, you don't need these in the main game. But it would be fun side DLC, and it helps build the world a little more, especially the World of Ruin. And that would be fine. That's like DLC you make after you make a completed game.
Yeah, you should make the game planning to only make one game, and if it sells 12 million copies and you want to kind of exploit it a little bit, that's fine.
Yeah, it sprinkles on top of the ice cream. It's like you don't have to have those sprinkles on there to enjoy the ice cream, but it's just nice to have on there.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy Final Fantasy X, and I don't have to play 10-2 to enjoy 10. Like, and it just is what it is. I think we should start wrapping this up, but I realize there's one thing we do have to address that I think we skipped over. How did you feel about Ignis and his whole situation?
I mean, I like Ignis. His cooking habit is pretty funny and stuff like that.
New recipe. Well, how'd you feel about the whole going blind thing? Did you feel like that was,
I could tell from the moment that they didn't explain his blindness or what happened. The first thing that popped in my head, I was like, that's the DLC. Like his story DLC. Because they announced the DLC before.
Yeah.
Like, I could tell. That's the thing with the story. I could tell each time there's going to be DLC. Yeah. I 100% called it on each one of them.
Well, it's so bad, though, because that's supposed to be a very emotional scene. And I should be thinking, like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to Ignis. But instead, we're like, oh, this is DLC. Like, it just seems like instead of having us focus on what should be a very, like, satisfying scene for, the story, it's just, oh my God.
Well, for Ignis, I mean, if you want to make that DLC, fine. But you still need to explain how he got blind.
Even if they're like, oh, Arden did it.
Like, oh, Arden's men did something to me during the mayhem and I became blind. It's like, no, they just don't explain it. It's like, you can say that, and then you can say DLC. You can have the DLC elaborate on it.
Sure.
You need to tell people what you did. When Gladiolus came back, he needed to say, I had some things I needed to work out. I felt, I felt weak after the moment with Ravus. I needed a moment for myself. Stuff like that. And Prompto, that needed to properly be addressed and say, he had the issues here, and they needed to have a better executed cutscene about that, at least.
Yeah. Well, I feel like because we've been ragging on the game pretty hard, and I think, honestly, I agree with all that, but I feel like what they did after with Ignis, they did a couple things that I felt like were fairly well done. I mean, you had that one mission where you had to go basically kill that Marlborough. Ignis is kind of like barely creeping on, and he can't keep up, and he sucks at fighting because he's blind. You go to cook, and he can't cook anything anymore, and you're so used to that. I feel like all that was really well done. I mean, that actually kind of hit me a little bit. Like, I was like, oh man, I actually feel bad for him right now. And it was kind of gratifying for Ignis to be the one to discover how to kill the Marlborough. It was kind of like, oh man, he still has a purpose. So I mean, if I had to be positive, I'd say that one aspect they did do fairly well. But I do agree with you. Like, they really should have given us some more information, because the whole time I kept thinking, like, man, I hope they tell me like how this actually happened. Like, Yeah,
notice that we phrased the story mostly on the second half when they actually focus more on the story with the train ride. Then that's what you're talking about there, is the scene where they're just together and they're dealing with Ignis and his blindness. And, of course, Ignis himself dealing with it. And I agree with you. That was actually, I thought that was done very well. I mean, gameplay-wise, it was kind of annoying.
Right.
But, like, on a story perspective, it's understandable. It's like you're bringing Ignis along, and you're trying to make sure that you keep at his pace. And I was like, that's done well. This is building up, character and relationship between each other. And I thought that was, done pretty well. And eventually, Ignis gets to the point that he is a well-contributing fighter again.
Right. Which I felt was kind of strange, but...
Like by the 10-year mark, when he, 10 years later...
He kind of, yeah.
He could fight efficiently and be blind. I thought it was going to be a temporary thing.
I was waiting the whole game for them to come up with something.
And I think that's fine. I mean, he stays blind. It's something he has to deal with, and that's good characterization. And I think probably out of the group, I probably liked Ignis the most. I know a lot of people say they like Prompto the most, but I liked Ignis the most.
Yeah. I'm in the middle. I liked Prompto, but I think I do like Ignis a little bit more. And I think the only reason I kind of liked Prompto, it was kind of a debate for me, was because usually you could tell Prompto is filling that annoying character that Final Fantasy always has. They always have that really annoying character. I don't know why they have to do that. And you could tell Prompto was supposed to be that character, but they actually did it fairly well, to the point where like it got like almost grating with some of the things he would say, like OMG or something like that. I would just be like, oh my God, I'm going to hang myself right now. But like outside of those few rare moments, they actually found a really good balance with that. It didn't come across too annoying. So I think for me, that was like kind of a success for Square in that perspective. But if I were to say like which one would I'd rather hang out with, it would definitely be Ignis. I don't think I'd want to hang out with Gladio. He seems kind of, I don't know, too invested in...
I think Prompto's like that because... I think Prompto was done well enough like that, is because the characters around him and him are like self-aware of the type of character Prompto is, and how they work off him.
Sure.
That is done very well, so it kind of eases the blow on some of the annoying stuff that Ignis says. Like, if he does, like, some silly comment, then there, like, comes Gladios coming in and saying something, to make him sound like he sounded, like, a little ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, like that thing you keep hearing, they're like, oh, God, it's so hot out here, and then Gladius is like, take off the coat.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean...
It's kind of how they bounce off each other.
Yeah.
Prompto work the way he is.
Right. And I was really impressed with how much, that actually, like, those things actually played off each other. I mean, like I said, he had a few grating moments. I remember at the beginning of the game when he was like, Chocobos. I was like, oh my God. Please do not ever do that again. I'm trying to enjoy the rest of this game, but they kept it pretty tame. Did you have any final thoughts with the Final Fantasy 15 story?
I think I've mostly said what I've said, but like I said before, it's like everything is there to make a fantastic Final Fantasy. Like the characters feel great, like the story, like elements are great. The world has a lot of potential, despite going only 18 miles of it around. The world of Eos, or the land of Eos, has a ton of potential. Like everything is beautiful looking. Like aesthetically, the world is gorgeous.
Right.
Places that you do actually get to go to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there weren't too many towns in this game. Now I'm thinking about it, huh?
Yeah, a lot of stuff you saw from the distance, like Empire stuff, or Tenebrae you saw from a train. But anyways, it's just a lot of wasted potential. Like, this could have been, like, a crazy good Final Fantasy game. One that could have potentially rivaled something like 7.
Sure.
At least or like something people could have talked about, like, 10 years from now. I mean, we're already we're almost hitting the year point of when 15 came out. So it's a few months until we...
and they're still releasing games.
10 years from now, people are not going to talk about this game. They're still going to talk about 6, 7, 9 games like that. The games that, truly made the series what it is. And I don't think Final Fantasy 15 is going to be the contributing.
Do you think that there's still going to be a hardcore audience that's bring back Versus 13 that are still really wanting that story?
I mean, I think if anything, you just build a time machine, go back and tell them to keep doing Versus 13.
Yeah.
I think the damage has just been done on that. I don't think you can go back to Versus 13 and not look at it as more as correcting a mistake that was 15. Square Enix is never going to admit that something like they made mistakes with 15, and making Versus 13 would kind of show them Square Enix that they made a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've just noticed there's a very small segment of the internet that really thinks Square's working on it. But yeah, the game itself, just wrapping up, I think it was, like you said, I think it was overall, like, it had good elements. It wasn't a very cohesive game. It had a lot of issues with character development, a lot of issues with presentation. Honestly, a lot of the elements, maybe that some of the newcomers that didn't really resonate with me, was because it seemed like it was rehashed story elements from other Final Fantasies. Luna seemed like Aerith. The whole World of Ruin was Final Fantasy 6. A lot of Prompto's story was Final Fantasy 7. So, I don't know. It just didn't really resonate with me. But hopefully anyone listening to this, you're still with us. You probably feel the same way. I'm imagining if you love the game, you're not listening to us ranting about it this entire time.
To speak to the audience, if I'm wrong about something in the facts or something, it's just simply what I've read. If you have any evidence showing that, like, what I've said is wrong or anything like that, I won't respond to it, but if I ever talk about it again, I'll definitely correct myself.
Yeah, we're just talking here. We could get things wrong. It happens.
Yeah, I'm not a lore master or anything, so we're wrong about something, It doesn't change the opinion of how the overall game was done. Yeah,
we've talked at length about this story quite a long time, much past our original 45-minute goal, but that's okay. But anyways, thanks for listening, and we will do this again.